Well, right now we're confronted with a combination of a very large wave of anti-labor sentiment that's been pumped up beginning in the States and now spreading to Canada, primarily by a group of billionaires who have decided that they would be better off if there were no labor unions.
What other country on the planet gives corporations a tax break if they move jobs out of the country? Tell me it. Does Germany give you a tax break if you leave Germany? Does France? Does China? Does Japan? Does Brazil? Which country gives you a tax break if you leave the country? Only one. United States of America.
Yeah, I mean, this is where our movement, by the way, needs to do a little bit better too on our own end. The way in which that we have sort of allowed the conservative forces, corporate forces, to demonize school teachers, people who work to stop violence in the home of children, who work, who are paid by the government. It is a very conscientious attack by corporate America, and it has one primary motivation, and it's that that's the highest unionized sector of the country right now. So they're busy focusing on how to destroy good jobs in the so-called private sector. And they kind of succeed, right? We're at single digits unionization rates in the private sector in America. And then they begin the pivot, which is now they've got to come out against the last highly unionized sector of workers in this country, the last people who are, by the way, mostly women and mostly people of color. The biggest source of good jobs in this country for people of color is in the public sector.
Especially in the 19th century, the Pinkertons were, they had a larger standing army than the U.S. government at that point. It's a private army that is out there for hire, able to come in and assert themselves. So there was already this pattern out there prior to 1892 of the Pinkertons coming in with Henry Clay Frick and others into the coal fields and the coke fields, into other mills, of pretty much, kind of splitting heads and being very violent rather than coming in to keep the peace.
We had a peculiar institution here that nobody else had called the Coal and Iron Police, which were quasi-state police, but hired by private companies completely and paid for and housed by private companies, but had state power. Nobody else had this, and they were much more dangerous and worse for Pennsylvania. The Pinkertons, they controlled the coal fields in the Mon Valley. They were the ones who were largely the backbone of this 25,000 armed men that U.S. Steel controlled with the coal and irons. And they weren't overthrown till the 30s.
There were 60 people in the room, women and children as well as men, in Oklahoma City, trying to start an oil workers union. 6 men came in with overcoats on, and they didn't take their overcoats off. They just stood against the back wall. And the organizer leaned over to me and Woody Guthrie, the other singer there. Woody was the extraordinary man who wrote This Land Is Your Land and several thousand other songs. He says, those men don't take off their overcoats. They may have clubs under them. They may be intending to break up the meeting. See if you can get the crowd singing. Well, we did get them all singing, the women and kids too. And they never did break up the meeting. Afterwards, they came forward and said, this is a different kind of a meeting than we were told it was going to be. We were told you were a bunch of communists who wanted to overthrow the government.
There is a rice company in Greenville, Mississippi, used to be known as Uncle Ben's, but now it's the Mars Food Company, and they make candy bars too, not just rice. But they have a temporary worker system where you can work there for 10 years and still be called a temporary worker. And when asked how can you justify keeping someone on as a temporary worker and never making them permanent for 10 years, one of their managers said to me one time, well, that's a job we don't need anyone permanent for. But who do you think you're talking to, and who do you think believes you when you say that? If I work for 10 years, I'm permanent. I'm full-time and I'm permanent. The difference is I'm not regarded as a real employee, Thus, you don't have to pay me benefits, and you don't have to negotiate with me for a decent wage.
You know, if Mother Jones could face down bayonets, maybe we can do that. And she did. I mean, just one story, I love to relate this story of a man who went to one of her speeches. He had traveled 100 miles by train, and they asked him, "Why are you here?" And he said, "Well, my son was in a battle in Colorado, and the soldier took out a bayonet and was going to stab him with the bayonet, and Mother Jones stepped right in front of it. And so I wanted to thank her for her bravery." He added, "My son was killed later on, but at least at that point, you know, that she saved him." And I thought, what a powerful story about the labor movement, about how people faced this kind of terror.
So the company comes in, it builds housing for the workers, it sets up a school, it sets up a church, but it also runs the church, it runs the school, it runs the housing, it owns the church, it owns the school, and it pays the worker, but it pays the worker in script, not in real wages, in script that the workers can only spend at the company store, where the company sets the cost of the goods. So it creates, under the umbrella of benevolence, a form of paternalism that was more about control than anything else.
George Bear made a statement that the men of labor should basically get down on their knees and thank God for men like us that were here to give you work. This is almost like the divine right of kings that they'd fought over here before the Magna Carta and what have you over in England. So you had a mindset that we're the ones that put this business together, and they deserve to make a profit. But to what extent you deserve to make a profit, the point here where you have to you subjugate people here to the point where they're slaves. And basically that's what they were. They were kind of in an economic merry-go-round that they couldn't get out of. No schools. Don't build a school in the area, because if you educated your workforce, you'd lose your laboring class.
You've got cops, firemen, paramedics out there doing the job for minimum wage. How many of those teachers have a master's degree in education? How many of them have been on the job for 20 years? How many of those cops are laying down their life? How many of those firemen are laying down their life going into a fire or protecting the community as a law enforcement officer? And the paramedics that are out there, this is this is sinful. It really is.
The issue of unions causing job losses is absolutely ridiculous, and of injuring the economy. The fact of the matter is that as unions are successful in driving wages up and benefits up, there's a corresponding increase in wages and benefits in non-union workplaces.
Out in the Midwest where I'm from, in Oklahoma, it used to be a Democratic state, now it's a solid red state. But you have people who own the newspapers in that area, just a constant pounding about labor bosses from back east, or like we're criminals or things. And as I said earlier, it's just a total conjecture, a picture that's been painted by the right-wing media and the Chamber of Commerce and different entities, right-to-work committees, saying that, these big bosses up in D.C., they don't care about the average worker. You can't be further than truth. You would not go through the strain and stress that we have as presidents of these large organizations representing people if you truly did not care and worry about the future of the workers in this country.
That right to collective bargaining, that right to try to improve your pay and working conditions is not only important to the union members, but very important to the general public. In fact, it was, I believe, the foundation of the middle class of this country. Right now, we don't have that. And what we're watching is a collapse of the middle class. And I think it's important that individuals understand that they don't need to stand alone, that they can stand together with others and work to improve their lot in life, and that's what they need to do.
Corporate greed. I think the corporations are making a lot of money, and in the past they would negotiate fairly and be able to trickle down that money, that profit money, to the employees. They develop good employees who work really hard at their jobs, and that extra profit is not trickling down anymore. The corporation CEOs make billions of dollars, whereas before they did not, but their workers are working just as hard.
The politicians are eliminating the middle class. If no one can see that, they have to be blind.
Because people are fed up with the way things are going with the government and the way that large corporations and big money people are trying to destroy unions. They're trying to kill us off. And we're just not going to stand for it anymore.
The economy will never get better until middle class people have money in their pockets to purchase things. And until the politicians realize that, then we're just going to be in this lull we've been in for the last 10 years. So somebody's got to get their heads out of their butts and let's get this country moving.
Go buy an American flag. Guess where it's made? In China. Made in India. I mean, they don't buy, it's everything you see. It's all made somewhere else. What about us people? The people that live in this country.